Hello everybody and welcome to the Royal Blue Podcast and this very special episode as myself, Conor O'Neill, Gav Buckland and Dan Haygarth reminisce and pick our favourite Goodison Park memories. Lads, the dust is just about settled now. We're a couple of days on from Goodison Park's final farewell. Gav, I'll start with you. What did you make of the day?
Dust hasn't settled in my eyes, to be honest with you. I spent most of the time the last few days probably. Fantastic. It was. I mean, as you get older, you experience new things on fewer occasions, and I know it was a new experience for everybody. It was just an incredible. It was an incredible day, and can't say any more. Really.
Me and Gav are obviously both fortunate to be inside Goodison. Dan, you were the Echoes man outside Goodison.
Was indeed, yeah.
That probably would have been a lone job any other time of the year, just be outside Goodison whenever to play, but on Sunday, you were joined by a couple of thousand people, I think it's safe to say.
It was amazing, yeah. So I couldn't get tickets, so I thought the next best thing would be to to work it and just soak up the atmosphere around the ground. And it was amazing. Like the coach welcome that didn't really happen. I was in the middle of that outside the Winslow on Goodison Road. And then, when the game kicked off, everyone just sort of sat around the ground and listened to Goodison and sort of heard the ground in full flow for the last time. And I found it quite moving, actually. It was a really great way to experience it, yeah. It really was.
For today's episode, we are going to do something probably a little bit different to what we normally do. It's maybe a little bit more structured and more question and answers, I think it's safe to say, than a discussion. But I think some of the answers that we will give will get tongues wagging, I think it's safe to say, because there will be people out there, I'm sure, who will disagree or agree with our selections.
I like to think on the Royal Blue Podcast that happens most weeks.
It probably does, Gav, it probably does, yeah. I think we've all been the victim of some feedback over the years.
Judging by some of the comments.
So we'll start off with some quick fire ones, gents. First match you ever attended at Goodison. Gav, we'll start with you.
5th of February 1972, Everton against Walsall in the FA Cup. 4th round, a game you can see on YouTube for the magic of it, really. We won 2-1. I remember it not vividly, but I went in the Park End stand with my dad, and the experience was, that was the first. We had a black and white telly. It was the first time I've ever seen a game in colour. So it was like green grass, blue stands, blue shirts. When you're in the black and white world, it's like. It's just a different perspective, isn't it? And that was the first thing I noticed. It's in colour. And the second thing was, and I always say this, is like if you go behind the goal, and especially as a kid, I think I'd say it was for my 6th birthday, which had been the week before, is how wide the ground is. You don't realise that from the camera angle, especially when you're a kid. It was just like, it's just looking down the ground and just like, it's really wide. And we won 2-1. And they know, so as I always like to say, more people watch football on Merseyside that day than any other day in history. And that will always stay the same now, because Leeds were playing at Anfield in the FA Cup. There was 56,000 at Anfield. And Sam had the record attendance that day, 25,000 against Stoke. So it was 126,000 people watching football in the area, which is the best. The highest ever, and also one of the most famous games in English football took place at the same time as at Goodison, when Hereford knocked Newcastle out the FA Cup. Motti, Ronnie Radford, and all that park was on the pitch. That took place when I was at Goodison.
I mean, I don't know what Dan's answer is to this, but I don't think we're going to compete with that. That is some going for a day for your first game.
Your first day, your first game is significant wherever you're playing, isn't it? Really, it's a personal thing for you.
Yeah.
Really, it doesn't matter how long ago. I mean, that was the one thing, I know going slightly off of the tangent here, that was the one thing, you learned about Sunday is everybody's equal, aren't they? It doesn't matter how long you've been supporting, whether it's like me, 53 years, or people have been 53 days, or, you're all equal, aren't you? And like the players coming on this and they say, lads, well, it doesn't matter, you're an Everton player. Doesn't matter whether you made 500 appearances or 5, you're an equal, aren't you? And that's the one thing, that was the one thing I took from Sunday, is like we can all have these conversations, but everybody's got their own memories and stuff, and we're there's an equilibrium there, isn't it? There's no one who's had a better support and career than anybody else, and I don't think it's like what you learnt on Sunday is that everybody is the same, don't you, really?
What was the first time you saw the famous Goodison green grass?
January 2006, Everton 1, Arsenal 0. James Beattie scored. Yeah, was in the family enclosure. Went with my mum, my dad, my sister, and my uncle. Yeah, James Beattie scored. I think Alan Stubbs' first game back. He'd come back from Sunderland.
Yeah.
Amazing. Like, I thought it would always going to be like that because we'd been Arsenal, but it was. Yeah, I remember we were late. We missed Z cars. We're always late in our family. And I remember hearing Z cars from Goodison Road, and just then, I don't know. From the second you walk in, you fall in love with the place, don't you?
Yeah.
So, yeah, an amazing day.
Yeah, the first time I went was Saturday, August the 26th, 2000, and we drew 2-2 at Derby County, and I was also sat in the family enclosure. And in Treverton style, we raced into a 2-0 lead at half time.
Yeah.
And to come in the second half.
Score for that.
And it was just Strooper, was it? Scored the equaliser. Frank Jefferson, Tommy Graverson were on target. But my override memory of that day, and we actually still have the picture in, I think it's in my granddad's actually, is getting a picture outside the Dixie Dean statue with me scarf on it. Yeah, and it's still a picture that we've got.
Yeah,
I remember like that was the first time I've ever seen a statue. You know, like when you see something like and then you go in and yeah. I remember I think the second or third time I went as well, I was in the top balcony and I was absolutely petrified. I hated it.
I've never been in the top balcony.
Hated it. You know, because like it's so steep, and as a young kid, you just sat there, and I kept moving, and they go, "I'm going to fall." You know, obviously you're not going to probably fall off, but like, yeah, it was. But so. The family enclosure, 2-2 draw with Derby. Probably sign of things to come.
We were talking about the Arsenal game on Sunday, actually, because, you know, like, obviously, traditionally, we always kick towards the park end in the first half. I think that in the second half. That was a rarity. I think it might be the last time it happened where Everton scored the first half winner, but it was at the Gladys Street end.
Yeah, because it was right in front of
James Beattie, wasn't it?
Yeah. He did quite well. He muscled two centre-halves out of the way and took it quite nicely.
But It was on a rich vein of form, and Beattie, but... Yeah, that was funny. We were talking about that game on Sunday.
Just obviously, me and I've obviously spoke that we were both there on Sunday. So what was your last match then?
Peterborough in the cup in January or February. Yeah, it's just been because I'm not a season ticket holder anymore. I gave mine up when I went to Newcastle for university, and then by the time I came back, there was a waiting list, wasn't there? And I've just not made my way up it. So yeah, Peterborough in the cup. It's been nigh impossible to get tickets in the league in the second half of the season. So. Yeah, quite a low key way to do it, but I guess it was quite nice to see Leighton Baines in the dugout as a final.
I was going to say that'd be like your last game at Goodison was like a one-off, really.
It was really
Baines and Coleman and the
sacked the manager 4 hours before kick-off.
I was in. I actually went as a spectator. That was the last time I went as a spectator, and I was with my daughter in the Vines in the afternoon, and there was a load of Peterborough fans there, and we were like, having a bit of banter and stuff like this. And about 3 hours later, I said to them, we just sacked our manager. You don't expect to say that about 3 hours before kick-off to the opposition fans, do you? We just sacked our manager. But so that's quite a notable game. Yeah, that was a one-off. Yeah,
we didn't play that well, did we? But it was a bit of a standout. You're right. Yeah,
yeah. My last match as a spectator was the Merseyside derby.
That's a good one.
Just gone. Tarkowski's last gasp. Winner.
Absolutely. Well, my first game in the press box was quite a momentous one. It was the night we sold Duncan.
Was it? Yeah.
Yeah. I was talking about this the other week. I seen Hullet on the stairs, and somebody shouted over to him, "Have you signed Duncan Ferguson?" No, it's because there was rumours going around as soon as the game finished. Yeah.
So, Gav, best match you've witnessed under the Goodison. Lights, sunshine, rain.
Yeah, there's many, isn't there, really? But, I mean, it's best match and best having performance don't necessarily have to be the same thing. Are they two separate questions, are they, or just...
we can do them as two separate questions.
Best match I've seen at Goodison. Strangely enough, I was thinking about this, because listening to your podcast, I don't know. There's so many. I would say, for drama... I don't think you beat the 4-4 against Liverpool, because and for the drama what happened afterwards, I think that was an extraordinary game. I think the only time in FA Cup history teams come back 4 times. Mm-hmm. I know their goals were great. And all that were like all messy, weren't they? But I'm going to say, in terms of entertainment from end to end, don't think I've seen many better than the 3-0 one when Martinez was here, but Rodgers in November 2013.
And that's such an underrated game, that. Like, people's memories. Yeah.
But I don't think I've seen, in terms of end-to-end, the Goodison and both teams going for it, and there's a bit of quality there. I don't think I've seen a better game than that, really.
I always think that's one of them derbies where both teams both sets of supporters rightly come out afterwards and went, we could have won that. Normally when you see a derby draw, one team's been looking to hang on, or one's dominated, and especially what we've seen with Liverpool in recent years. But that was one of the games where you thought we had chances, they had chances.
It's extraordinary. I mean, I think they equalised in the 89th minute, and both teams then had a couple of chances each to win in injury time. So in terms of the best game, in terms of entertainment, that's right up there. But in terms of drama and the importance and the stature of the game, I'd have to go with the 4-4. That was just an extraordinary game, but full on entertainment. I don't think you want to beat the derby match in November 2013. That was another brilliant game. Yeah,
mine is when we beat Man United 1-0 2005. Big Dum scored. Yeah. Just because I think it felt like a monumentous victory, that in the chase for fourth. And I think the way we played that night, it was very, probably dogs of war up and at them. Don't give them a kick. Yeah. We're going to be 10 times more aggressive than you are. And I think as well, what also was a young kid at that time, we'd played Man United in the January in the FA Cup, hadn't we? I think it was the January or the February. And I remember thinking, we've got a chance of beating United. And, I remember they turned up that night and they beat us 2-0, and they beat us quite comfortably. I remember thinking...
That's his debut, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I'm
not sure whether it was. He played... Maybe Goodison debut.
But it was one of them where you thought, actually, we've probably still got a little way to go here before we can compete. We'll be a little bit ahead of as young kids, you get a bit ahead of yourself. But that night was where you thought, this is on, we've got the chance of getting fourth. We've just... And they lost the plot a little bit towards the end. Obviously,
we lost the plot towards the end, didn't we?
But I also think as well that why it's such the best matches, because as a young kid, that was the first time I experienced Goodison shake when Big Dum scores, and all what you've heard before, about the great nights and this, that, and the other, and that was the night where you heard that kind of roar and the atmosphere.
Great bit of Martin Tyler was there on Sunday, wasn't he? There was a great bit of commentary by Martin Tyler in that game, wasn't it? When Arteta's just about to take the free kick and he says, the atmosphere is incredible. Imagine what it was like if they scored. I hope Ferguson was by Ferdinand on Sunday, wasn't he? Both doing telly lights. I think that Fergie demanded Ferdinand, listen, mate, that was a little bit. Because Ferdinand was a little bit weary there. He didn't challenge him at all, did he? Yeah.
Yourself, Daniel?
The 3-3 is probably the best football match I've seen at Goodison. Just amazing. We were both very good footballing sides that season, I think. And the moment where, was it Lukaku's header that made it 3-2 to us?
Yeah, I think so.
Because he scored 2, didn't he?
Yeah.
The moment where he made the 3-2, Goodison that's as good as I've ever heard it. But maybe other than Palace and things like that. But that was just extraordinary, because I think we all felt we'd done it. We'd beaten them for the first time in ages. It felt like, but that was a great game. And then that Sturridge equaliser still haunts me. Soft goal. It felt like a soft goal to concede.
It was a soft free kick, wasn't it? They brought it in about 15 yards from the touchline as well. Not the first time, but In there's an interesting thing in that. In when we went 3-2 ahead, we've never ever won a derby match 3-2.
Really? Oh.
Ever. Yeah, we've lost a few 3-2. It's unbelievable number of derby matches we've lost 3-2. But we've never won one 3-2. And I remember saying, I can't remember, somebody, we never won a derby 3-2, and then Sturridge scored. And we could have won derby 4-3 in the end.
We could have done.
They could have made 1-4-3. Another
favourite was Arsenal 1-0, 2007. Andy Johnson,
yeah.
That in the hail. Yeah. Just felt, as a kid, that just felt so, it felt so amazing, that win. Yeah. And that was a great let-off at Goodison as well. And I was with my uncle, who's an Arsenal fan, in the main stand, so that was quite good fun.
He loves you when you go in. I know. But to be fair, that was another great game, wasn't it? The 2-1, the Rooney game.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That was a. Forget about the Rooney goal. That was a really, really good game of football, and against absolutely. I mean, probably the best team I've seen play, Goodison, Wenger's Arsenal.
Yeah.
Even though he's my mate, but I told him that. But seriously, that was another five. There's so many, isn't there?
Yeah.
But if I say one, it would have to be the 4-4. But as momentous, but as pure, unadulterated entertainment, I don't think you're going to be.
Well, let's go to the opposite end of the scale now. And the worst match you've seen.
Well, best ever performance, 5-0 Man United, by the way.
If we're doing best performance, Arsenal again, 3-0 Arsenal 2014.
Yeah,
that's been mentioned, hasn't it?
That is my best performance.
Did you mention that?
That's the best performance I've ever seen from a Goodison.
I was so convinced that like the glory days were back after that. I thought we were astonishing.
I also remember as well when, if you remember famously, Lukaku played on the wing, that just starts on the wing. And everyone was like, what is he doing? Yeah. And obviously we all worked out why, because he wants him to cut his side, and obviously he scores. And I remember coming out after thinking, we've got a genius in charge, like this fella knows what he's doing. It's like
Nacho Monreal, I think, at left back for Arsenal.
Lukaku just could not get, he couldn't get near Lukaku. But it was like, you walked away thinking, God, this fella's a genius who's in charge. Like he's just completely like, blew them away with his tactics and the performance.
Naismith through the middle, wasn't it? The first one felt it. Naismith, and he was just in the right place, but then Lukaku cuts in for the second goal.
Obviously, of course, as Arteta scores the own goal, isn't it, for 3-0, and that kind of made it the perfect day, didn't it? Because Mikel was very much the devil around that time, wasn't he?
And I suppose it's good to see both Arteta and Rom on the big screen on Sunday, to be fair. And you forget... I know, like, I wouldn't say he left under a cloud, but, there was times where he could be a bit difficult, couldn't he, Rom, in terms of what he was saying, but he was a hell of a like. I mean,
we can come on to him because we've got a few individual questions.
Okay, don't go ahead.
So,
but absolutely.
When it comes to the worst match, I have two in mind. One was under David Moyes' first spell in charge when we lost 4-1 at home to West Brom.
When Thingy scored the hat-trick. There was some of the West Ham players. Yeah. Hat-trick, wasn't it? Whose name escapes me.
Chayobi, was it? I think his name was.
Yeah.
But it was dismal, and the other reason was I remember being a teenager at the time going, and it was cold, and I had a cold at the time, and I couldn't get warm all game. You know when you're really cold, and you just get more and more cold as the day goes on. And I remember coming home thinking, don't know why I bothered even coming today. I should have stayed at home because I wasn't very well. I made the effort to go, and I just sat in the cold and got more cold and more sick watching. And the other one, which I think is still the worst, is when we were beaten 4-1 at home by Newcastle.
23 game.
Yeah, 2023 in Shundash. And the performance wasn't that bad for 40 minutes that night. And Calvert-Lewin just scored just before half-time, would have made it 1-1.
Yeah.
But the way we fell apart in the second half.
Crumbled, didn't we? Yeah.
And at the time, we were fighting for our lives. And I remember genuinely thinking, we're going to go. And the atmosphere as well, because I think there'd been a coach welcome that night, and everyone kind of tried to get going again. And I remember coming away thinking, and by full time, the stands were empty, and it was just really flat. And I remember thinking, this is one of the worst nights I've ever seen.
I mean, because that's the thing about worst game. It's worst ever performance, but worst game in terms of the significance of the result. They can be two completely different things. And you've mentioned that. I mean, there was nothing on the West Brom game.
No,
it was just played badly.
It was just a bad
Newcastle,
afternoon.
we probably played better.
Yeah.
But, actually, the significance of it, and it was summed up, wasn't it? Demi scored in the 90th minute to make it 3-1, then they went up the end, they still conceded, And
I think that the fourth goal was the one where Isaac gets the ball on the touchline and takes it past four of our players, and no one tackles him.
I remember coming home, and I don't really drink during the week. I remember having to have 6 bottles of beer.
Yeah.
And I ended up talking to my neighbour, and saying, I think we're there.
I was in the Denby for that, and didn't leave full time. Felt I've got to drown my sorrows here.
It felt like it felt one of the few nights I've had to go to somewhere that was soul destroying for all the wrong reasons, because I generally come away thinking, we're not just in trouble, we're going to go. Like, we've got no fight, we've got no spirit, we've just crumbled, and
defensively we were poor.
You looked around, you generally thought, what is going to keep us up could be, because the year before, obviously, we'd seen the fans rally and kind of drag the team over the line, and we'd done the same, but it had no effect, and you do start to think, this is bad times.
Yeah, I mean, going on your points, I think there's two answers. I think in terms of the worst standalone game, where it's the 5-0 against Liverpool in November of '82, undoubtedly, because that was just... I mean, those are the days, of course, when Goodison was a lot bigger. It was like 52,000, and you'd have a lot more Liverpool fans there than 3,000 now. So, You know, if you lost the derby, it was like worse because there was like so many more away fans there in all parts of the ground. So that the 5-0, I think it was the final episode of Boys from the Black Stuff on the Sunday as well. I remember writing it seemed pretty apt that the two things happened on the same weekend as an Everton supporter. So that just made it work in terms of tying Everton's decline or perceived decline at the time to the state of the city. Just seemed after those two things happened on the same weekend. But picking on your point, I think in terms of letdown, we think in terms of significance, I think the home game after we got beat by Arsenal and we got beat by Crystal Palace when we had the Champions League in our grasp. I think we won 7 games on the spin. And if you watch that Arsenal game, you'd think, which one of these two teams has got to get into the Champions League? You go, it's got to be Everton, haven't they? They're flying, and Arsenal was struggling, just beating them 3-0. I remember turning up at Goodison and thinking, if we win there, win this, it's just one more game. And we got mugged by Palace. We played very well on the night, to be fair. Scott Dan scored, I think, Scouse as well. Yeah. And in terms of the significance of that, if we'd have got in the Champions League, it could have. We didn't really recover from that result. We lost to Southampton on the Saturday, I think, 2 on goal in the first 20 minutes or something. Remember that? Yeah. And then
I think as well, we're also stung with that Palace game was that we should have played it 2 months earlier.
Oh, the windy
night.
The
wind got called off because of the wind. I mean, there's loads. We always say, don't we? It's very Everton, but it did feel very Everton that the start of that run, we should have played Palace at home. It gets called off because of bad conditions, and then we played them 7 games later where we're flying. You think, oh well, this will be a walk in the park.
And they were struggling against relegation, weren't they? But they had some good play. Well, Yannick was playing for them, wasn't he? But in terms of the context and feeling deflated and having something in the grasp from getting it taken away, I think that will probably be the one that. There's an argument to say that we've still never recovered from that result.
Yes, really. As a football club,
we've never really recovered because that sort of brought to the end of the Moyes 11 years. Martinez's great first season sort of stopped then, didn't it? After that result, and I'd argue that we've never, as a club, we've never recovered from it. So I'd say that is probably worse than 5 when I think about it. But yeah, I'd say that.
Any times you'd be forced to leave early? Booed?
Never left early. I don't boo. But the worst ones, and I can't really pick between them, but they're for different reasons. Losing 4-1 at home to Brighton under Lampard.
Oh, yeah.
That I remember sitting there thinking, this is so beyond broken. I don't know where we go from here. That felt like a real low point of that run that season, and we were so poor. It was so poor and so many errors. And yeah, that one felt really bleak. Wigan in the FA Cup, losing 3-0 at home.
Yeah. I think missed opportunity.
Yeah, it felt like obviously then Wigan win the FA Cup, don't they? They beat City in the final, but that cup run felt like if it was ever going to happen, it could be that year. And we were astonishingly poor that day, like really, really, really bad. So that one sticks. And then I remember being there, but I can't remember who we played. We lose 3-2. Jared Bramford gets sent off in that Lampard survival.
Yeah.
That one that had a coach welcome. The atmosphere was amazing. We go 1-0 up. You think, right, this is gonna help us. We're gonna be essentially safe.
Yeah.
And it capitulated. And I left that thinking, God, this is terrifying. This is really terrifying.
Was that 22? The game,
22.
That was the Sunday, wasn't it? And then Palace was the Thursday.
Yeah. So then I was going to Palace as well again on the Thursday. I thought, I was just terrified, absolutely petrified.
Yeah. That was another time. I think.
I think the one as well. What missed opportunities, which we talk about, was the we may have forgot there, but the recent Fulham defeat in the League Cup on penalties.
In retrospect, absolutely.
Because you talk about there about we didn't recover from the Palace setback. If it must be felt like that derailed Sean Dyche's.
It did, because that was the 14-15 game run without a winner.
And then after that, we fell apart in me a little bit. We never really recovered, and it all felt come back to that night of.
There was lots of games in the 80s where you think, that was but a lot of the time wasn't going on in terms of poor performance. Say Howard's, when Howard was struggling, 0-0s against Coventry and stuff, but there was nothing on. We were struggling, but we weren't in relegation danger because mid-season. But I think most fans would probably pick those a game from that 22, 23, 21 up to 24 periods, wouldn't he, really? Because that was where some bad performance, where there was a lot at stake.
Yeah.
And, there's some home games in that period. I mean, that Brighton one was just horrendous, wasn't it?
Shocking. Absolutely terrible. Yeah.
I mean, the goals we gave away that night, Garner Guy.
Yeah.
Pass it to Solly, man.
I also think as well, actually, one of the, probably more of a moment, one of the worst was the derby when Rafa was in charge. Rafa's one and only derby, Goodison, when we lost 4-1. And don't get me wrong, they were streets ahead of us ability-wise. I remember being there as a fan actually in the main stand, and I think they scored. That's about 5 minutes. Henderson scored, but he'd had 3 chances before he scored. And I remember after 10 minutes, sitting to the lad next to me going, the gulf between us two is this could be 10, because they were just so far ahead. And but I remember I think they'd gone 4-1 up, and obviously Goodison was starting to empty, and you could sense it was getting a bit toxic. And the Liverpool fans obviously started singing Rafa's name, and you could just feel the mood changing. And
I was in the press box with him doing the press box that night. Was that time when Marcel Brandt got hanged?
Yeah, he said, "Do you think it's just the players or something like that?" In the end,
there was a pointed conversation there, wasn't it?
But that felt like one of them nights as well, where it was a bit like, it's gone wrong this, and now it's
mid-season now, isn't it? It's the end of the game. That like the Newcastle, Brentford and all that. Those are the games that actually you think, that's that's us done. 40 minutes to pull it back down.
You mentioned him earlier, Gav. Now we move on to the individuals.
Yeah.
Romelu Lukaku, is he in your thinking to be the best Everton player you've seen at Goodison Park?
In the 21st century, he's up there, isn't he? Really?
Yeah,
be,
for sure.
Premier League era, absolutely. He was certainly the best striker I've seen play for us in Sharp. Though, actually, I'm gonna qualify that by saying I think Louis Saha was the best striker, all-round striker than Lukaku. He just never fit. Louis Saha was a really... you don't get signed by United. Ferguson decided it unless, you're not a dud. And Saha was, I think, a better player than all-round player than Lukaku. But he just wasn't fit. But when he was fit, he was
Rooney always said he was his favourite striker to play with, didn't he? Which I always thought was telling.
Top class, top draw striker there, Saha. So much in his locker. And when he was fit, he was really good. Really good. That night... that night when we beat Chelsea 2-1 in 2010.
It's a great finish.
Yeah. Well, there's 2 great finishes. One at the near post. He missed the penalty that night as well, didn't he? Where he mugs off John Terry, doesn't he?
Yeah.
For the cross comes over and he lets John Terry, and then he just chests it down, volleys it in with his left foot. That's top against the team that had won the title that year. And that was top quality striking. In fact, that's probably one of the best performances under Moyes, the 2-1 against Chelsea, because we absolutely battered them. And they ended up champions that season. We beat Man United again on the Saturday, was it? 3-1?
3-1, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going off on a tangent here. We're going back to best games of Goodison, aren't we? Best Everton player I've seen at Goodison? Only one, innit? Only one answer. Everton, really, for me. By an absolutely gigantic distance. Well, he's world class and then some. For not only world class, but world class on for a prolonged period of time. He had everything really in terms of his career, in terms of being high standards and longevity. Even at quite an early age, you see he was top class. I mean, remember Gordon Banks went to see him play in '84. Gordon Banks, the greatest English goalkeeper, and he said he did the piece for the Daily Mail before the '84 Cup final against Watford. He went to see Nev play at Villa, and he said he has got a discernible weakness. And Nev was only probably 24 then, so that's quite a young age to be a great keeper. And ironically, his best years for Everton were not the years when we win the titles. It was probably 87 to 91, 92. Those were his peak years when he didn't miss a game.
It's quite funny because I was talking to Chris Beasley about this yesterday. Actually, we were talking about Neville Southall and how good it was to see him at Goodison, because obviously he's had a few health issues I think in recent weeks. And I was saying that the big thing for Southall is that for as good as the 80s team was and the players at the doors and stuff, he's the only one who is renowned as the best in the world, the best in
I think the big people abroad who've mentioned others and stuff. What I would say is I would be surprised if there's a player who played with Neville Southall who didn't say he was the best player I played.
But that's what I'm saying. So many even opposition. They were first. Whereas you look at members of the 80s team, they're obviously idolized by Everton, but they're not
Yeah,
they're
absolutely.
not idolised perhaps by
yeah.
other clubs.
Yeah, I mean, well, what says it for me, you look across Stanley Park. I mean, when you name Neville in conversation with Liverpool fans, or you see stuff posted on social media, you'll see comments from Liverpool supporters under. He's one of them few players, because you have to be a genuinely great player to be like this, is to command. You're truly a great player if you command respect across both. Can you say Stanley Park anymore? Like, what's that? No, we've had this conversation.
We still can, yeah.
Across Stanley Park,
we're reminiscing nostalgia.
Yeah. Between Anfield and Goodison, and Neville, I would imagine, is the one Everton player in my lifetime who commands that respect off Liverpool. More of because you had to be brilliant a lot of the time. I mean, some of the saves Nev made at Anfield. One from John Barnes was just unbelievable. And he saved some of his best performances there, but Nev for me by an absolute country mile. You're the best outfield player is. I don't really know. I've favourite outfield, but I'd tell you the most important outfielder was Peter Reid. Daisy's success doesn't happen if Reid is not playing. Without a shadow of a doubt, he could have got away with Nev, not playing strange enough, but Reedy was the difference. It doesn't happen, and you've only got to see what happened to the club once Reid left. To understand there was, his influence
a little bit.
Yeah, it was the glue, but it was just a great player as well. Reid, it was Goodison career had a couple of false starts. I mean, it was a failed move in '80. He came here 2 years and then took a year to get in the team. I mean, the famous Coventry game when he won 2-1 in the League Cup in 1983, which sort of kick-started the Renaissance. He came on a sub, got booed, and so he was the glue that, but he was more than that. He got us up the pitch, and I don't think it happens. I think if you take Reid out that 80s team, it doesn't happen. I mean, 85, 86, he was injured for a lot of the season. We didn't win the title. I think if he'd been injured, if he'd been fit all season, we would have won the title. But I think Reid is the most influential player. Never the best, Reid, the most influential. So his personal favourite, Kevin Sheedy, because he do unbelievable things. So I'd have them three really. But shout out for a few from the modern era.
Who is the player who was on the back of young Daniel Haygarth's shirt then? Who was on the posters?
First shirt I had was Rooney.
Yeah.
And in terms of what they've gone on to achieve in the game, Rooney is the best Everton player I've seen at Goodison. But in terms of what I saw from him, it was mainly when he came back. So I can't say he's the best Everton player I'd seen at Goodison. But yeah, as a kid, he was my hero. It's a tough question, because I think from the 21st century, there are lots of people in with a shout. Loved Cahill, loved Arteta, loved Pienaar. Yeah. Loved Yakubu, that season where he scored 20 goals. He was brilliant. Lukaku is up there. Richarlison is up there for me. Pickford is up there for the contribution he's made in the past few seasons. Coleman. But it is probably Leighton Baines. I think for over a decade, he was just brilliant. I think people focus on probably from about 2011 to 2015, 2016. But I think he was excellent for a long time before that as well, and an unbelievable footballer who I think his defensive ability was overlooked a bit. I think he was always a solid defender, but just going forward, that overlap with Pienaar and the way he'd strike a dead ball, love Leighton Baines.
Yeah, well, you've stolen my thunder because my answer is Leighton Baines as well.
Yeah.
But I do think Romelu Lukaku is criminally underrated by sections of Everton supporters.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Lukaku is definitely up there.
I know obviously he didn't give himself in glory in some of the comments he made and stuff like that, but I think you look up, it's always a case, isn't it? You don't know what you've got till it's not there. And when it comes to someone who can score 20, 25 goals a season, we've never really had that since, have we? And we're probably, a long way off having that, because you look how much 10% of votes now cost.
Because we're talking about great players here, but me sort of favourite is Adrian Heath, probably, because I loved Inchy just as a person, as a player. There's that thing about, you can tell people's age by their favourite player, because Dutch psychologists many years ago did a study of people's favourite footballer, and what they found was that footballer was at their peak when that person was 14.
Ah, right.
Well, and if you have a look, I mean, I'd like, and she's like, I don't love Kevin Sheedin's, he's probably like my personal favourites as such, and he signed when I was 15, you know. And it's like anything else in your life. It's also it's your most impressionable. And nobody's favourite player is often when that person's 40 ever.
Yeah,
it's like a lot of music you listen to is when you heard when you're 14, 15, your favourite films and stuff. So you can tell a lot about a person's age when they say, like, you know, I mean, there's people just a generation before me whose favourite player is Bob Latchford, who's like not in the 80s team, because they were probably born in the early 60s when Bob Latchford scored 30 goals, you know, like in the mid 70s he was the man, you know, and they'd be about 14 at the time, and their favourite players, Bob Latchford, in their favourite season 77, 78, not 84, 85, because that's a sweet spot in your life when you know, when you're at your most impressionable, and I sort of get that, you know. I would imagine a lot of Everton fans of similar age, Leighton Baines is probably their favourite player, I think.
But on Lukaku, I think somehow his Everton career is overlooked. And I remember at the time, there were accusations of him just being a flat track bully. Yeah. He scored so many huge goals. Obviously, there was the United semi-final where he missed that penalty, where at times it did go wrong.
Also missed a couple of chances that afternoon.
He did. But that quarter-final in that run,
Chelsea,
scores two against Chelsea,
absolutely.
two brilliant goals.
Yeah.
Obviously scores two in that derby that we mentioned. But yeah, the idea of an Everton centre-forward scoring 25 goals in all competitions in a season is alien.
I also think it's about the big thing with Lukaku as well, was like he was the perfect person of like those routine home wins that we'd have. He'd just get two. You know, we might win 3-0, a routine home win, and get two.
Christmas, we won about 7 or 8 on the spin, and it was all like 3-0, 2-0, 3-0, wasn't it? It was like the 6-3, wasn't it, Bournemouth?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you a funny story about the Bournemouth game. Is I did Bournemouth had scored the fastest goal at Goodison before the Corey. So this is 2017. So Heritage Society has a page of the programme, so I thought I'd do a thing on fast goals at Goodison. And I ended it by saying, you know, the lesson to learn from this, you know, this article is make sure you're in your seat for the kick-off, because you don't know what you might miss. And Lukaku scored after 25 seconds in that game, you know, like, so if you'd had the programme, you would have been on the seat, I think another player, but I want to talk about later, but in that group, and he was there on Sunday, I would say, whose talent with the ball and his technique was as good as anybody who's seen Everton's Leon Osman. His technique was unbelievable, Ozzy. You know, his first touch and his...
Just a really tidy midfielder,
and there's some, you know... Yeah, someone said when he got out, it could have been a good number 6, Ozzy. Take the ball on the half term and distribute it around the pitch. But he had the technique to kill for Ozzy. I mean, he could have easily played in an Arsenal midfield with Fabregas and stuff and not looked out of place, Ozzy. And he missed 4 years of his career, didn't he, early on, with injury?
So you picked who you idolised in Bloom.
Yeah.
Who was the player who you'd watch for the opposition and think, I wish he played for us? Who's the best opposition player you've seen at Goodison?
It's really tough to pick one. I think for me it's David Silva. Yeah. I was always just amazed by him, how easy he made everything look. And that City team under Mancini, probably about 2011, he just was integral to everything they did. He'd be up there, I think. Unfortunately, players like Sparrows and Gerrard would be up there, but I'm not going to dwell on that or go into that. But probably David Silva. I loved watching him play football. Yeah, absolutely loved him.
Mine is Dennis Bergkamp, because I remember being about 10, maybe something like that. We played Arsenal, and the ball got fired into him, and he like trapped it with 1 foot.
Yeah,
took it on, turned with the other, and like passed it. I think Henry scored or someone scored. I remember, like, in a moment as a kid, you just like, oh my God, like that was incredible. And obviously, he was just a machine. Like every time he'd come, I just always was like in awe of him because of just how good he was and his ability to control. But I do think the best individual performance I've seen against Everton at Goodison was Gundogan a couple of years ago when City won 3-0. He scores an overhead kick. And he scored a free kick, I think it was.
Yeah.
But he just looked, I mean, we say levels above. He looked like he was playing a different sport to some of our players because he just controlled the midfield.
That wasn't hard at the time, was it?
No, but you know when like the quality that with like the overhead kick and stuff like that, the Gladys Street, you're thinking, I mean, it's one thing to, like you say, run the midfield against every midfield, but the individual brilliance that come with it.
And
was
you're
just,
on opposition side of scene. We were fighting for something.
I think they were going for the title as well at the time. They would be going for the title.
Arsenal,
But Dennis Bergkamp was, as a young lad, just left me in awe. And obviously, you've got to give a special shout out to Henry, because I think he's probably one of the best players.
Scored the Goodison, did he?
No.
Yeah, I mean,
it's always terrible in every game I saw.
Well, it's like Gareth Bale,
I was
isn't it?
thinking about that. Yeah, Gareth Bale never did much.
Gareth Bale, everyone goes on about how good Gareth Bale was, and I think Gareth Bale, again, talk about criminally underrated footballs in this country. I think Gareth Bale is
that's British football of the 21st century.
Is very much that, but I don't know whether it was because Seamus Coleman and Phil Never used to man mark him, but he never really done that much. Because the way he come away going, oh, you know, he's great.
I think Henry never scored at 2 Premier League rounds. One was Sheffield Wednesday, one was Goodison. But he never played the Sheffield Wednesday once. I think he played 8 or 9 times at Goodison. Never scored, because there's that weird fact, isn't it? Because Merseyside was absolutely terrible for 3 to 3 greatest probably strikers. Ronaldo, Aguero, Henry scored 2 goals from open play in 39 appearances on Premier League appearances on Merseyside. Wow. And one of them was Ronaldo in his last game at Goodison. The only one before that, being Aguero in the 3-2 game when City needed to win. And I think Tim Howard told us that. Only joking, Tim. No, but I think it was a bit of a soft header, like, really, and maybe Howard should have done more. But I think, like, it was a graveyard, you know, because I was thinking about this. You'd obviously go to Henry would be your first go-to, but then, as you were saying, I was thinking, I can't remember seeing play. I remember Bergkamp playing well. I remember Perez always used to play well. I mean, they were just such a great team.
Perez on the 4-5 season.
Yeah,
when they won 4-1, and he just like floated around the pitch. We couldn't get near them.
They were just so. And
that was the day when Bergkamp, I think, blew me away. Just you know, when you think like, whoa, like this, these are good. You know what I mean? Like
they were just so good to watch.
Yeah.
They were just.
I always remember. I think we like after that 4-5 game took with my dad, and he was like, just don't get this out. And I was like, they're just really good. Like don't, because obviously the first game you've been before at home, but it was just like they're just really good. Don't get this out and buy that.
No, but it is funny, isn't it? Oh, like there's great play. So there's some players who like always score there, who were journeymen.
Yeah.
If you think about it, who was the fella for Wigan who always used to score?
Paul Sharney
always used to score there. Never used to score anywhere else. John Steads was another one. Always scored there.
4-5 seasons. Supposed to win it. For Blackburn to win 1-0.
The season before and the season after. He came with Sunderland when he'd been relegated, still scored. There's play. I mean, look at who scored the last hat-trick at Goodison? Josh King. You know, another one
who always
scored. Who always had no goals in 9 appearances for Everton. Like scored. So it's funny, isn't it? Sometimes some of the greatest players I've played in this country always had names when it comes to Goodison. Other players who were journeymen.
Is there anyone who stuck out over the years you've been to Goodison? Anyone stuck out where you've just loved watching them?
I think
or you've looked forward to watching them?
I thought Silva was just an extraordinary player. I mean, he's produced one of the few moments I've seen at Goodison. And you might remember this, where the crowd has gasped. I remember the April 2011 game where Ozzy scored the header. You know the header? Yeah. They won 2-1. And the ball got absolutely ballooned up in the air at the edge of the penalty box at the park end in the first half. And like he came down and Silva just killed it, and he just did, ooh, you know, like one of them. Like everybody has a deep insight, take a breath. Like, you know, I think Silva. But I've seen quite a few. I mean, I think it's mentioned before. To me, still the most influential and most important player in the Premier League history is Roy Keane. And Roy Keane was just a brilliant player, Roy Keane. You know, absolutely brilliant. He was just, I mean, Cantona was obviously more influential for United in the short term in terms of getting them to win trophies. But, I mean, Roy Keane controlled seasons for Manchester United. You know, and he was fantastic. Silva. I mean, there's so many. Bergkamp was a great player. I mean, Harry Kane's always played well at Goodison, didn't he?
Always scored.
Always scored. Like Harry Kane was always
the 6-2 game.
He's always been. I mean, remember the game in COVID? The 2-2 game. He absolutely whacked 2 volleys in or something. I mean, Harry Kane would be right up there. Unfortunately, I have to go back to our rivals across the park, probably, I think. And I'd probably say Souness playing for Liverpool. Souness is the best British player I've seen, and I'd say Souness, but that could be anybody. It could be Dalglish or Rushworth. Dalglish is probably regarded as being the better player, but Souness and Keane were probably quite similar. But a shout out, I think Silva's a great shout. He was just his ability on the ball was just it was just something else. Even in an outstanding City team, he stood out. Silva, didn't he? You know, he's just a beautiful player to watch. And I mean, I've always mentioned before, who I think was a better player than De Bruyne was Hazard. Hazard
to watch.
Hazard was a great footballer to watch. Absolutely extraordinary. Here's another one.
The scorer of great goals was Hazard. So Gav, sticking with you, favourite Everton goal at Goodison?
Narrowed it down to 2. When you say favourite or best, you say, because the favourite one could be a last minute winner, you know, like that Andy Johnson goal.
Yeah, you can have both. You're more
ideally, you want one with you know, an absolute 90-minute rip roarer, you know, that wins the game. I think narrowed it down to 2. One was it's a fantastic Graham Sharp's volley against Spurs in 1982 at the Park Ends, which I'd only ever seen. That was where the ball leaps up in the air, and I don't think I've seen a goal like it. Leaps up in the air, and Sharpie literally leaps about a yard, 4 foot off the ground, and volleys it in. A bit like the Paolo Di Canio goal at West Ham. I've got a photograph of it at home from behind where Sharpie's volleying it, and it looks so Sharp's headed it. He's that high off the ground. That'll be one. I think the other one, which I think now marginally overtakes it, I think Aussies against Larissa was just perfection. You know, not the move between Baines and Baines and Baines. No, it was Baines and Cahill, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Cahill plays it into Pienaar, and Pienaar's back heel is just he couldn't. If he'd have picked the ball up and put it behind him for Ozzy to kick, he couldn't have done it better. And Leon, because his technique was so good and his understanding of the game was so good, the way he just lengthens his strides. That's what he's supposed to do as a striker, right? He's supposed to lengthen his stride before he shoots, and he not only shoots, but he hits it with his outside of his foot, because he's the only player probably in the team, and I include Arteta in this, who's got the ability to do that, and he just curves it outside of the post that comes in. I'd say that's the best. I've seen other great last minute. You can't beat a last minute winner or a last minute equaliser. You know, I mean, I think Ozzy spoke about this on the one sitting in the press box where I think I've inwardly celebrated the most is Ozzy's last minute winner against Portsmouth.
At
the Gladys Street end, you know, and added time to added time. Where he just swivels, he spins in the Gladys Street and it goes.
Great goal.
I think they were supposed to play 3 minutes and he played 5 and he scored in the 5th minute, and that was the last minute winner under lights at Goodison. And I mean, even Moyes is not. He can be quite restrained, can't he? You know, he was Moyes was going absolutely berserk. And the other one like that, I suppose, was B. Radzinski's last minute winner against Southampton.
That's a great strike.
Yeah. And, you know, the Saturday lunchtime game, that was another one where everybody. So there's a difference between best goal and favourite goal, but I think Ozzy's goal is the best ever goal I've seen, really.
In terms of being there at Goodison, ones I've seen at Goodison, in terms of best goal, it's quite hard to narrow it down, I think. Yeah. I would also shout out Leon Osman, Man City, 2012, outside of his left foot.
Yeah.
Amazing strike.
That was the week after the Wigan defeat, wasn't it?
Yeah. We beat them 2-0.
That was when a famous video come out after when Yellowood scored.
Just definitely,
Language includes that we don't condone on the Road podcast.
But totally understandable.
But we've probably been prone to use with ourselves over the years at the match.
But that I remember sitting, I think it was in the paddock, and that goal sort of came out of nowhere and it just flashed in front of your eyes. You think, what an incredible strike for football. Another one I'd have, if I'm remembering it correct, is Arteta against Bolton in about 2007. He beats 2 men sort of, and then plays it onto his left foot and absolutely hammers it past the keeper, Jaskalainen, I presume. Great goal. And in terms of technique, Barkley against City in that game we threw away in 2014, sorry. Great strike, like,
and from left wing,
wasn't it? Yeah, just curls it over the keeper. But because I didn't really want us to win that game, I didn't celebrate it properly, so that one doesn't really mean that much to me.
Did that put us 1-0 ahead?
Yeah, it did, yeah. And then they went 3-1 up, and then we got a consolation. Lukaku got a header. But I've never, in terms of being in Goodison, the goal that has made me feel the most was Calvert-Lewin against Palace. Because, as I said, I was so petrified going to that game. And I know we shouldn't be celebrating, scrapping at the bottom end of the table and that sort of stuff. And I know all of that. But in context, that moment at Goodison was just extraordinary. And somehow, I'm very pessimistic when it comes to Everton, but somehow that felt vaguely like it was inevitable. Like, as soon as Keane gets that first goal back, I remember turning to my mate Tom, who I was there with, and saying, we'll do this. We'll get 2 more goals. There's something about it. We'll do this. And that, an Everton centre-forward scoring a header at the Gladys Street end to win that game felt sort of the perfect way to do it. And it was amazing after that. The scenes after that were amazing.
I have two. One, and obviously it's quite poignant because I've seen announced the park yesterday, is the Corey against Bournemouth. More so because you talk about press box, acting professionally. That is the one goal that I have not jumped up and celebrated, but certainly give it a few fist pumps. And I just think that goal, the sheer relief more than anything around the ground when it went in, you could just sense, it was like people was exploded almost because it was the nerves was kicking in. And obviously, I remember being sat in the press box and there was a bloke sat in front of us and he had the Leicester game on Sky Go, and obviously they were 1-0 up, and obviously you can't help but look, and it was all Leicester, and you're thinking West Ham are doing us a favour, there's no favour coming from West Ham, so we need to find a way ourselves, and the significance of that goal, because you talk about moments, you do wonder if that goal doesn't go in and we go down that day because we couldn't find a way to score. Where we are now and what position we'll find ourselves in now as a football club, because it was quite clear now what we know that around that time things were very sensitive, and not being a Premier League club would not have helped those sensitive feelings.
Funny to Corey, because obviously he's leading, and it's funny, there's a bit of an Andy Gray thing with Takore, where if you see Andy Gray's career stats at 68 games played for Everton, 22 wins, 22 goals, but 1 in 3 think, but it's the importance of those goals and performances at key moments in his career that made him an Everton great. And there's a little bit of that with Takore, isn't it, really? That you look at his stats, but actually when he has made a difference, he has made a real difference with goals, hasn't he? That we beat Brighton 5-1, and that was a big turning point, wasn't it? The goal against Bournemouth, fastest goal at Goodison, fastest away winner. Latest away winner for the club at Forest.
His own stats book, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's got it. He has. Yeah, he loved it. Yeah. So we saw him after the game. He drove down Watton Lane, on Sunday, and so he's one, isn't he? Where his stats don't tell anywhere near his full story of his Goodison career. Really,
the best stand to sit in. I'll go first because I think it's the local Gladys Street. I think I'll touch it because we would do best moments, and it leads into why. But I just think for atmosphere, the whole sucking of the ball in, nothing comes close to the local street.
I have a real soft spot for the main stand because that's where my season ticket was. Block 3 of the main stand, but the main stand isn't the best place to watch Everton. I like the Upper Gladys. There's something about the view. I know the lower Gladys is more packed in, and it probably is the better atmosphere, but I just love the view from the Upper Gladys Street end. And I think when a goal goes in and you're sort of on top of it, and sort of people begin to sort of fall from one row to the other and whatever, it just has a proper great let off when Everton score. So the Upper Gladys for me.
Just one funny story about the Upper Gladys. Your mate got locked in there. It's before I knew. I was doing a book called Strange But Blue about 20 years ago, and I found this story of an Everton game against Leeds reserve game in 1969, where usually for a midweek game it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I think it was the Easter holidays. Okay. So 2:30, the club ended up phoning Leeds and said, well, where are you? When I said, 7:30 kickoff, isn't it? When no, it's 3 o'clock. So that's to call the game off, So I thought, I was doing a book of strange moments ever. So I thought that'd make a decent paragraph. So I said to my mate later in the week, he's a bit older than me. I said, I found a funny story this week about an Everton reserve game in the 60s where the opposition didn't turn up. And he goes, was it Leeds? And I went, yeah. He says, have I never told you that story? And you know when somebody tells you that, like you just think like this is absolute gold dust, this isn't it? And it was. He said he was walking up Gladys Street with his mate. It'd be like schoolboys, and then like some Mr. Ben figure came out of the Gladys Street stand and said, "Listen, the stand's not open today, but if the ball goes up there, we need somebody to get the ball back. Will you? Will you go up and watch the game? You don't have to pay." So they went up anyway. So and then he told me what happened is like about 10 to 3, lovely sunny day. The announcement comes up the tannoy. The game's being abandoned. Collect your money on the way out. So they're sitting there, mad in the view for about 10-15 minutes. Thought we'll have to go. Went to the door where the Gladys Street stand, locked. By that stage, there's nobody in the ground. And him and his mate are sitting in the Gladys Street stand. And he said, how are we going to get out? So they ended up having to shimmy, as you do when you're a teenager, shimmy down the poles of the Gladys Street stand onto the terrace. And then walk around the ground for 3 hours. They couldn't get around the ground. About 6 o'clock in the evening, some fella came out and said, wait, it's in the ground since 3 o'clock this afternoon. Locked in. Couldn't get out. Went out because those are days when there's only 20, 30 people at the club, And they took the names and the club wrote to them and gave them money like as compensation for being locked in the Gladys Street and in Goodison for 4 hours. Yeah, that's your story. That.
Do you have a favourite stand?
Gladys Street lower. Yeah, because I stood there in younger days,
We've not got many questions left, but best Merseyside derby win? Goodison?
Oh, the 3-0. Yeah. I mean, say the 1-0 Andy King, but in terms of like a rare hammering only hammering really of Liverpool, wasn't it? Really, I'd say.
Yeah.
After I'd say the 3-0.
Mine is the 1-0 Dan Gosling.
Yeah.
Only because it was a midweek game. And as you know what's like when you're in school, and Liverpool have done quite well, and even when they do another thing around Liverpool around that time as well, even when they weren't very good, they were still winning trophies.
Yeah,
they'd obviously won the Champions League, and then they'd win the FA Cup, and even when they weren't great, they were still winning trophies. But to be able to go into school the next day and just be like, we beat you last night, and how good was that?
Yeah.
And the goal and how late it was, and obviously for those watching at home, they didn't see it because the adverts. Kicked into stuff like that. Yeah. But that was just more of a personal, more of like being a school kid going to school and being like, we won last night, Have that type attitude when you've been sitting enduring this, unrivaled success compared to ours. Was a nice one.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I did mention before, best defender I've seen a Liverpool player, Alan Hansen. Unbelievably brilliant player.
Best derby win?
I've never seen us win a derby in person. I have not attended any of our handful of wins in my lifetime.
Yeah.
So, but I remember the Dan Gosling one, and I remember we saw the goal because we didn't have HD. There's people watching on ITV HD, I think.
Was it? Yeah.
Right, okay.
But I was in the Denby when we beat them 2-0 a couple of years ago, and I loved walking in here the next day. Yeah. It's that, I suppose being in an office is not, maybe I've not grown up since school, but I do.
I was going to say, we compared to the schoolyard.
I do like that bragging, right? And we don't get it that often. But that 2-0 felt like such a seismic result for us and for them, didn't it, really? So, yeah, I would have loved to have been there.
Is that the definitive Goodison game under lights, the 2-0?
I think so, yeah.
I'm not sure. Which leads on now.
Sorry, I know we're conscious of time. Because like in when we played Bayern Munich and stuff like that, even like there wasn't a thing about Goodison under lights. You know what I mean? It wasn't. Even like we played Liverpool in the 60s and there was 104,000 across Goodison and Anfield. It was a thing, but not a massive like.
Not like it is today.
Not like I wouldn't say cliche, but a belief or something like that. Goodison lights great. And I'd say that, in terms of a definitive Goodison game under lights, I think that 2-0 will be right near the top, to be honest with you.
Well, you talk about Goodison under the lights, talk about best moments next. And for me, it is James Tarkowski's equaliser against Liverpool, February this year. Someone who's in the low Gladys Street that night, not working, not professionally in the press box. I actually was telling Sam, we'll look up the Sunday Mirror at this a few weeks after, because he asked me, because obviously he knows I'm an Everton fan, and we were talking about it, and he said, "Oh, was you you have to? And I was like, oh no, I said I was in the local Glasgow street. And he said, oh, I bet you were made up. And I said, yeah. I said, I might have shouted some things that my mum would not be proud of that I shouted that night, and used some words in the afternoon. And I was actually fortunate enough to be sat next to Matt Jones's dad. Matt Jones, obviously, the Echo and the Blue Room. And I'll never forget the goal going in, the euphoria of the goal going in. Then the heartbreak when you see that VAR is reviewing it, because you're thinking, if this goal was against us, you're never going to the end of this, because A, they won more derbies at Goodison than we will have, but also, you know, the celebrations were all in vain and it meant nothing. And I'll never ever forget the goal being given and just me and Matt Jones' dad just hugging. Like, we just turned to him and we just hugged. And I'd never met him before. And I actually said to Matt Jones next day, I said, I think I hugged your dad tighter last night than some of my family members I've ever hugged, just because of the sheer relief, you know, of it given. But I just don't think the raw of when he scores and he comes charging into the back post and he scores. And I think as well, it was more the last minute. I actually thought we played really well that night, but as soon as they made it 2-1, they were by far the better team, and we looked like they looked like, to be fair, they burst our balloon, and we didn't really have any response. We were a bit dead on our feet, and they controlled the ball, and it was just, you know, it was a very Everton goal, wasn't it, as well? We just got it in the box, we flicked it on, you know, and
centre up, it's the life out of it.
It's the life out of the man, and you know, he could have put it in road double centre to Upper Glasgow Street, couldn't he? You know,
I get that. I mean,
so that for me is by my best moment at Goodison, just for the whole 5 minutes that followed.
I watched that game in the Winslow, and it was mental. It was like probably the closest sort of surrogate you can get to the ground. Yeah, it's like being there, and
you hear every kick.
Yeah,
or moan or groan.
Yeah, was there a delay on the telly compared to the ground, or?
I remember some guy walked in.
Yeah,
I don't know. He was just causing trouble. He said, "My wife's in the ground," and said it's been ruled out. I was like,
yeah.
I bet there's a few extra words in this response to that statement.
We've spoken about on the normal Road Blue podcast, haven't we? On occasions where we've been against bigger clubs in big games, then where we've been on the rough end of VAR decisions where the game state has come into it, where they've had a lot playing on it. Say the Rodri handball, they're notorious 1 and 2 and 22, where they just bailed the ball without giving it because they knew that it could cost City the title. And I think that came into it, the Tarkovsky goal. It's a brave set of VAR officials and referee who disallow that, you know.
I always remember, I can't remember what columnist it was, but there was a column piece afterwards, and the columnist who wrote it just said something like, you get the feeling the VAR went with the decision to make sure that their friends and colleagues at Goodison not get out safe and alive that night.
And, you know, of course, it's that people are only human, aren't they, at the end of the day?
But could you imagine if they'd have, Michael Owen trying to get off that pitch? Not that we condone any action, but
if there was an element of that, you're going to give it to the home team there, aren't you? It's just human nature, isn't it? And I think that definitely the game state. I thought the most important thing about that goal for me was it meant that the last piece of derby history, Goodison, was our history, not theirs.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That was the most important thing of that. The fact there was an equaliser, it doesn't matter. The most important thing in derby history, you know, in terms of serious moments, was ours, not theirs.
So you might not be in there that night, but what is your best Goodison moment that you've been there?
I'm probably going to have to say Palace, that Calvert-Lewin goal, and then the celebrations that followed. The sort of seemed like endless chanting of Spirit of the Blues after full time. And you're right, Connor, when you say with the Bournemouth game, it's just relief, isn't it? It's just that it's a different thing, relief, I think, to the ecstasy of, let's say, if we'd won something, won a cup or whatever. But the relief was palpable, and that night was Goodison at its best, Goodison saving Everton. And Spirit of the Blues is a very apt song, isn't it? Because it was all about sort of spirit of the fans, as cheesy as that is, that got Everton over the line that year. And yeah, I felt like I've sort of been saying this in the run up to us, the men's team leaving Goodison, so that Goodison's last act over its final few years has been saving Everton and willing Everton over the line, and sort of testament to just how amazing the football ground is, really. So Palace will always live long in the memory for me.
Mr. Buckland, does one moment stand out above all else?
I'll give one off the pitch and one on. On the pitch, Kevin Sheedy's twice taken free kick against Ipswich in 1985. It was just unique. You never see that anywhere.
Raw ability, that is.
Yeah. That's only Kevin could do that. I think that even now, I've never seen that before or ever, you know, and it happens right in front of you. So that was just. But I think personally the best moments. Well, from Tuesday to Sunday wasn't bad, was it really? But I think in terms of personal thing, I think after he won the title against QPR in '85, when the players went round the pitch, we'd not won the title 15 years. We knew the reverence that Liverpool had and the respect they have for being champions, but they weren't champions anymore. We were, and when the players when post-match tours of the pitch by players were done properly, where not random family members and the family pet and window cleaner and gathered on the pitch at the same time. It's just the players and the photographers, and that journey around the pitch is my best moment, I think. And there's echoes of that on Sunday, I think. You know, the crowd reaction and stuff, and the emotion. But you know, that's my best moments at Goodison. Best moments on the pitch is Sheedy's twice taken free kick.
So to finish, what are we going to miss most about Goodison?
I'm not going to miss the seats in the press box.
Well, yeah, I'm not going to miss the pillars.
Yeah. And
my obstructive view of the park and goal every week.
What am I going to miss? What we're not going to miss or miss?
What are you going to miss most?
What I'm going to miss?
I think the people.
Yeah.
Because I think it's obviously going to be very different, isn't it? And, you know, it's where Everton, Goodison is, it's a very, you know, community area, and there's people been doing the same thing for 30, 40 years, you know, outside the ground, maybe selling programmes, and, you know, perhaps Bramley-Moore's not going to have that same edge as what Goodison has got, and, you know, and has. So I think the people, I think it's a big thing.
It's shared history, isn't it? I think that's what I'd miss when you go there. It's the shared history, not just the history of the club and the ground there, but shared history of the people who've been watching games there, you know, quite a few, you know, photographing my mate's dad, who saw us at Goodison when we were in the second division in the early 50s, you know. Yeah. So that, you know, that there's lots of people who've seen lots and lots of games over lots and lots of years, and that's what you miss, isn't it, really, I think?
Two things, basically. The sound of wooden seats hitting back up when Everton flood forward or have a corner or a goal's about to go in, and then when it shakes when a goal goes in.
Oh, yeah.
But, like, there's something about just that feeling is, whichever ground I've gone to on away days or whatever, I don't think, replicates that. But I think what I'll miss most and what makes Goodison most special to me is having lived in a time that's been quite lean for Everton's history, is walking in that place and knowing you're somewhere where Everton have won league titles. Yeah. While Everton have been here, Everton have been the best team in the country and have been one of the best teams in Europe and one of the best teams in the world. And Pele's played there and Eusebio's played there, and that's the thing.
Stallone's done the walked on the pitch.
Beckenbauer scored there.
That's the thing that, like, when I was a kid and when I was getting interested in football, and sort of my dad was very much like, you understand, you got to know about the sport, you got to understand where the sport has come from and that sort of thing. And Goodison represents that to me. It's the history of football is there, and Bramley-Moore will be great, but it won't have that, will it? You know, like we will have been there from the start with Bramley-Moore. So there's no real mystique with me for Goodison. There was always a mystique of what would it have been like there in the 60s or the 80s or during the 66 World Cup. So somehow that'll be the thing that I'll miss the most, because that's the thing that always hits me when I'm in there, is how much of the heritage and the fabric of English football is represented by that place.
Well, also the heritage and fabric of the city.
Well, yeah, true. Yeah.
You know, it's an important part of the city's culture, isn't it? You know, not just the English football culture.
And of course, it's memories, isn't it? You know, people who, you know, go there every week and remember people who are no longer there alongside them, right, and then nostalgia of it, you know. And
that's one of the things I'm watching videos before Sunday. Is you just end up grieving for your own past, don't you? When you watch this type of stuff. No, remember that game? When we went out after that stuff, and you end up, you know, and that's quite a good thing, I think, because most of them are happy. You remember the good ones. Remember the odd 5-0 Derby defeat, but there's so much stuff here. We could have done this for 5 or 6 hours and still would have run. I'd still be talking about great goals for 5 hours, to be honest with you. You know, you could talk forever, isn't it? Really?
I think the beauty of Goodison as well is, and one thing that, you know, probably we will miss, is that everyone has their own individual memory, or own, you know, kind of nostalgia of it. You know, there's moments that people might involve that you might never think of that are so special to them for various reasons. You know, it could be the fact that it was the first time they took the son to the game, or, you know, the daughter to the match and stuff like that, you know. And there's so many ways, isn't there, of looking at it. And you know, like as Stan says, the big thing is that their memories are now going to have to be made again. You know, it's because Bramley won the first time, you know. Someone who might have took the son is now taking the grandson, or, you know, the great-grandson, stuff like that. Yeah,
absolutely. And, but I thought it's gone back to the start. Sunday was just fabulous. Spot on.
Thank you, gents. We will leave it there. I think we've reminisced about the past, and let's hope it's a bright blue future. And we're sat here in 25 years talking about the first 25 years.
I'm sat here in 25 years, to be fair. If you give me that now, Conor, I'll take that.
But no, Dan, Gav, thank you very much for joining us on a special edition of the Royal Blue Podcast. We'll be back on Friday to preview the game against Newcastle United. But for today, thank you very much for listening. You've been listening to the Royal Blue Podcast.